Sophie walked in slowly, making sure that she had entered the correct ward. She saw Jacob sitting with his grandma and sighed with relief. She walked towards Jacob, turned to his grandmother on the hospital bed, and asked softly, "Grandma, how are you feeling now?" Grandma replied, "I feel a lot better." Looking at Jacob, she asked, "She is?" "Ah, she's Sophie, the girl who I've been tutoring. When you fainted last night, her mother was the one who brought you to the hospital." Sophie's smile dimmed a little when Jacob introduced her as a student, but this wasn't the time to get upset. "So this is my savior." Grandma looked at Sophie with appreciation. "Come here and let Grandma have a good look at you," she said. Sophie came closer to the bed when she saw Jacob's grandma waving her over. Grandma narrowed her slightly cloudy eyes and observed Sophie with a big smile on her face. She was delighted to see the beautiful girl whose parents treated her grandson like family. She gently stroked Sophie's head and said, "You are so pretty." Sophie smiled on getting a compliment from Grandma. Her eyes curved like bright half-moons, and that made Grandma like her even more. "Jacob, Sophie is my savior. You have to work harder when tutoring her in the future," Grandma instructed Jacob, while still admiring Sophie. Sophie heard her words and looked at Jacob with pride, as if she had won some competition. Jacob could only nod his head with a smile. He knew better than anyone the impact that Sophie had on people with just one look. "By the way, what are you doing here at this time?" Jacob looked at Sophie and asked. "I only have a half day of school on Fridays. I got off early and wanted to come and meet Grandma," Sophie said. Jacob recalled how caring Sophie had been from the moment she had heard about his grandma falling sick. She hadn't left his side all evening and had held his hand, constantly comforting him in his distressed time. It was the first time she had shown her care and concern for him, even though it was through his grandmother. "Have you eaten lunch yet?" Jacob asked her. "I'll have it at home," she answered. "Eat with us," Jacob said immediately. "I was about to go buy lunch for Grandma and myself. Let me get something for you, too." He knew that Dracon had work today, and Helen might be busy welcoming the client she mentioned yesterday. If Sophie went back home now, there wouldn't be anything for her to eat. Sophie thought for a bit, kept her bag on the spare seat, and said, "I'll go with you." As Grandma lay on the hospital bed, listening to their conversation quietly, she thought, "This girl seems great." However, she could never imagine that this lovely girl was Jacob's wife-to-be. Sophie and Jacob went downstairs, walked to the hospital cafeteria, bought 3 meals, and came back to Grandma. Jacob was content with Sophie's surprise visit. When he first met Sophie, the stubborn high school student, he never thought that he would get to see this side of her. Their conversation was pleasant, and she wasn't even teasing him at all today. When they returned, a few nurses were surrounding Grandma. For a moment, Jacob's heart flew out of his chest. But it turned out that Helen had used some of her connections and talked to the hospital authorities. They were moving Jacob's grandmother from a general ward to the best private room in the hospital. Jacob and Sophie helped carry some of Grandma's things and followed the nurses as they wheeled Grandma to her new, luxurious room. "Okay, lunchtime, Grandma." Once his grandma settled down, Jacob brought the lunch to her. "Why aren't you kids eating? Don't starve yourselves," Grandma said, while looking at Jacob and Sophie. She felt that Sophie, as Jacob's student, had helped out more than enough. Jacob and Sophie opened their takeout boxes. Sophie liked the little cut-up pieces of chicken in the food and asked for Jacob's as well, which he gave to her very reluctantly. Grandma was slightly confused when he saw them bickering and yet being very intimate. They were very comfortable around each other. She hadn't seen Jacob look so lively in a long time. After lunch, Jacob asked the nurse to change the saline solution and watched over Grandma as she fell asleep. Sophie was planning to go home earlier, but now that they were in a bigger room, she didn't feel like she was imposing anymore and wanted to stay longer. She then started to do her homework as Jacob was also free to help her out if needed. Sophie sat at the table, which was right in front of the window, and the sunlight fell diagonally on her. It highlighted her hair, and her face looked like she was glowing. Jacob had always thought that the color of her uniform looked beautiful on her fair skin, and today, under that sunlight, she looked more beautiful than ever. He stared at her for a few minutes and then walked over to sit beside her. He answered all of her questions patiently. Time passed by and the sun started going down. Oblivious to them, their bodies formed a pair of shadows, cuddling on the floor of the room. Sophie finished up all of her weekend homework with Jacob's help. A few of her textbooks were still at Jacob's place, and Jacob could only return those to her on Monday. With no more work to do, they sat back peacefully, and the silence between them was comfortable. Sophie packed up her books and sat back, feeling relaxed. It was almost evening, and Sophie had been there for hours, still in her uniform. "Great, they changed the room," a familiar voice startled them. Jacob and Sophie saw Helen standing at the door, dressed in her business attire. She looked like she had come down right after her meeting. "What are you doing here, Soph?" She was slightly shocked when she saw Sophie. From Helen's expression, Jacob understood that visiting Grandma was Sophie's idea and she hadn't informed anybody. "I came here to visit Jacob's grandma," Sophie said to her mother and shrugged her shoulders. Helen smiled in gratification. She felt as if Sophie had grown up. She liked how her daughter was taking the initiative to get to know her fiancé better and share his concerns. "They didn't choose each other as their life partners, but it is so good to see them getting along. This might just turn out great," Helen reflected and thanked God for bringing the two together. Jacob saw that there were a bunch of fruits and dietary supplements in her hands, and he walked over quickly and said, "Why did you buy so many things, Helen? You've already done so much for us." "It's nothing," Helen said as she arranged the fruits and placed the supplements in the cabinets next to the hospital bed. She looked over at Grandma's bed to find her wide awake. She had woken up soon after Helen entered the room. She asked Grandma, "How are you feeling?" From her conversation with Sophie, Jacob's grandma understood who Helen was. She sat up and said, "Thank you for getting this old lady to the hospital yesterday." "Don't mention it. It is my duty," Helen answered, frankly. Grandma continued and said, "The bills of the hospital." Helen took her hands in hers and didn't let her continue. "Please, don't worry about it." Seeing that Helen was being so generous, Grandma felt terrible and repeated, "No, no." She had lived a long life, and these were by far the kindest people she had met. Jacob was just their daughter's tutor, and they were doing so much for him. "Please don't treat me like a stranger. We are a family after all," Helen said. "A family?" Grandma looked at Helen in confusion. Jacob felt his heart sink to the floor. Helen is going to tell Grandma now, he thought.
Please subscribe to the Pocket FM YouTube channel and press the bell icon for instant notification. Check out our channel for more such exciting shows.